Take your seats. I have the wonderful opportunity to introduce our speaker today. He is a professor at the Masters University. He is the youth pastor here at Santa Clarita Baptist Church, and he's going to talk to you today about some really cool stuff. But also, this Sunday night at this church, Santa Clarita Baptist Church, SCBC, he's going to be starting a series on creation science. So if you're interested in creation science, here at SCBC on Sunday night, we're going to kick off that series. This is your very own Dr. Matt McLain.
Okay. Hey, I'm going to talk to you about some interesting things. So you heard I'm a professor at the Masters University. I'm in the science department. I am a paleontologist, and I get the privilege of being a creationist paleontologist, being somebody who actually takes the Bible seriously, who truly believes that what's written in Scripture is true. And there are not very many of us, okay? I would say probably all of you have more friends than there are creationist paleontologists. Even those of you feel like you don't have very many friends, because there aren't very many, okay? And listen, the number of your friends is not important. What matters is that you have good friends that point you to Christ. But that is not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is Jaws, ears, and wild things, okay? So I want to, kind of my goal for you today, I want to introduce you some amazing aspects of God's creation so that you are in awe and wonder of God. And I want to talk to you about how someone who takes the Bible seriously approaches difficult topics in life, right? This is not going to be your normal kind of chapel message, okay? That's all right. They're letting me do it, so they can't stop me now. They could. They totally could. But some of this is going to be stuff that's totally new to you. That's fine. But the principles we draw here are going to be things that you've probably heard before in many contexts, but it's helpful to hear them in a different context. And many of you, I'm sure all of you have encountered challenges at some point, different kinds of challenges, from just trying to get your homework done to deciding whether or not to tell somebody the truth about something. Your character really matters, not just for yourself, but because you represent a God and you're created in His image. And I want to talk to you today about how you approach those kinds of things when you're in situations where you don't know how to relate the Bible with what you're actually seeing and experiencing in life, okay? And so let me get over there. First, I want to tell you, when you guys were starting the school year, I was over in South Africa. I'm actually not teaching at Masters this semester. They're letting me do what's called a sabbatical. It's not actually a break. It's a break from teaching so that you can do research. So in a lot of ways, I'm working harder now than I normally do. But I'm not teaching classes, I'm doing research. So I went to South Africa as part of this. And so in South Africa, I did like a big route driving around with some people. And it was fun. It was interesting. Didn't have any near-death experiences for the most part, so that was good. Saw lots of cool wildlife and stuff. And you can see some African wild dogs here. But I wasn't there for the wildlife, okay? I was there for the fossils, okay? So you can see this is like a skull of an animal that's in the ground. This is a cast of it right there, so you can see what it's supposed to look like when they clean it up and everything. It's just sticking out of the ground. I got to see a lot of fossils in museum collections, a lot of what my time was spent on. And then I even got to see some spots where you could actually find footprints of these animals from the distant past, which is pretty cool. I could like walk where they were walking, and I got to see like where they were like slipping in the mud and when they were swimming sometimes, all kinds of fun stuff. So it was very, very interesting, really, really cool trip. But the reason I went out there is I'm trying to understand a group of animals called therapsids, okay? So you guys have all heard of dinosaurs. You've heard of some other animals. Very unlikely many of you have heard of therapsids, okay? There's some really interesting things in here. Like the guy I showed you on the first screen, one of his relatives, this guy right here, Canamyria. These are dicynodonts. Basically, the way these animals work, you got a beak in the front, like a bird, okay? And you got 2 tusks, like a walrus. And that's like their mouth. And then the rest of the animal looks like a pig, okay? And some of these guys were small and burrowing. They could be small like think about like a naked mole rat, okay? But then some of them were as big as an elephant, okay? Big size disparity there and stuff. They're interesting. We got ones that are big carnivores that had saber teeth. So you've heard of a saber-toothed cat. These guys had saber teeth on the top and the bottom. They could open their jaws up to 90 degrees, so you could do a really big bite, which makes sense because of saber teeth, okay? And they could, chase you down and stuff, which is scary. Some of these are the size of a lion. Some of them are the size of a weasel. And then you had fun guys like Moss Chops here. Moss Chops is fantastic, okay? He has this big chest. He walks around like a bodybuilder, but on 4 legs, okay? It's big enough to ride, okay? If you wanted to, you could ride around on it. And its head is like extra bone. Like it's got extra bone up there to ram its head into stuff. So it would hit each other's heads, okay? Like bighorn sheep. Why am I showing all these things? First of all, it's just cool to see what God made that we were completely unaware of, right? These are unique expressions of the glory of God. But the reason we're specifically talking about them today is that these things are supposed to be your distant cousins, okay? None of them direct ancestors, but this group of animals are supposed to be your direct ancestors. And you might be like, oh, I thought that we evolved from monkeys. That's what they say. No. This is farther back, okay? This is hundreds of millions of years ago is what the evolutionists say. And so obviously as a creationist, I don't think we evolved from maybe some of you, but I don't think that we as humans evolved from these creatures. I don't think all mammals evolved from these creatures, okay? And so I want to understand these from a biblical perspective. In other words, if I believe the Bible is true, then what it says about anything is going to be true. And when the Bible talks about our origins, I'm going to believe it. And that's going to have consequences on what I go and see and study and try to understand. Okay? So when we look at these guys, this is the best one, I think. This is my favorite animal of all time. This is an Asteminosuchus. Okay? So this guy's big enough to ride, like small hippo sized, okay? Yeah. What is going on with its face? I don't know. I do not know. It's great. So listen. Oops. Went too far. No, not platypus yet. We'll get there. Okay. So why do people think that these are supposed to be our ancestors, right? Where would they get that idea? Okay. So number one, if you're going to believe in evolution, you're going to believe that everything has to come from somewhere, right? Nothing just pops into existence. It's got to have some kind of link to the past, okay? And so what they claim for these animals is that you move from more reptile-like guys to more mammal-like guys, and you can see lots of changes. You can see it in their posture, the way they stand. You can see it in their jaws and in their ears. We'll talk about that in a minute. And you can see it in their hands and feet. We won't get much into hands and feet today because we only have limited time. But I want to talk specifically about the posture and the jaws and the ears. So now we're going to look at our platypus, okay, since some of you wanted to see that. Oh, too far. Okay, platypus. All right. In school, you guys have learned at some point what a mammal is. I'm assuming, okay? So mammals have traits that we use to pinpoint them, right? So we might say something like mammals are covered in hair or fur, okay? How do mammals get their babies? Live birth, except some don't, right? Like our platypus right here in the echidna, and probably lots of fossil mammals. And then mammals produce what for their babies? Milk, okay? Now, there's also skeletal traits that you can use to pinpoint mammals. For instance, all of our mammals stand with their legs beneath their bodies. I'll show you that in a minute. All of our mammals have one bone in their lower jaw. All of them have special ear bones. Let's take a look at these, okay? So number one here, we got the erect posture. Every mammal, for the most part, stands with their legs directly beneath their bodies. Anyone in here have a pet lizard? I have a pet lizard. Wow, there's a lot more elementary with pet lizards. Just gonna say that. What do the rest of you guys, what do you have, dogs? How many have dogs? How many have cats? How many have birds? Wow, this is just a dog room. That's it. Okay, listen up. You know that dogs have their legs directly beneath their bodies, okay? But lizards have their legs way out. If you ever watch a lizard walk, way out there, okay? So that's a mammal trait. Another one is that our lower jaws are made of one bone, okay? So if you were to look at human skull, it's not actually this multicolored, okay? But your lower jaw is just one bone. It's called the dentary. Same thing, you look at a wolf or a Tasmanian tiger, it's one bone. But if you look at a dinosaur, any kind of reptile or amphibian or fish or anything like that, even birds, they have lots of bones in their lower jaw, okay? And so if you're going to evolve a mammal from a creature like that, what do you do with all those extra bones? Where do they go? What happened to them, okay? And so what the evolutionists say is that these bones in the back of the lower jaw, they actually shrink and they turn into your ear bones. Now, some of you are like, I don't have any bones in my ear. Yeah, that part doesn't have any bones, okay? But when you look at the inside of your ear, okay? So there's the outside, that's all cartilage, right? But we go down the tube, you got your eardrum, right? And then you have these three little bones right there, okay? They're called the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. Sometimes you hear them called the hammer, anvil, and stirrup, okay? That's how small they are. That's a penny. It's not an American penny. It's some other country. But, okay? They're really tiny. These are the only bones that never grow from the moment you're born in your life. Every other bone in your body grows except these. When you're born, they will remain the same size your entire life. Why? They have to be super intricately designed for hearing to work well. And you'll notice they're really funny shaped, right? Like these are not normal looking bones, and they're super tiny. And so the whole point is that these are designed to help you hear sound. That's how you're hearing right now. It bounces off the eardrum, it's transmitted by the different bones into your inner ear, which looks like a snail, and is filled with fluid, and there's all kinds of fun stuff that happens there, okay? And you can learn about that in biology class. So the evolutionary story is that those extra jaw bones turn into these, okay? And that seems really far-fetched. That seems really silly, okay? Oh, so how do they imagine this, okay? So you can see, you start with animals that are more reptile-like, and you end with animals that are more mammalian-like, and there's all kinds of stuff in between, all those weird and funny things that we see, okay? So let's take a look at some of the animals that are supposed to make this transition, okay? So your cynodonts are your most mammal-like of all these guys, okay? So most of the lower jaw is one bone. There's a few other bones back here. And if we could actually make this animate, which it doesn't, this rock, they did a CT scan inside of it. Turns out it's not a rock, it's actually a burrow, and there's two animals hiding in there. One is one of our cynodonts, one orthorhapsis. The other one's an amphibian, and they were just like chilling in there together. And so I don't know what they were doing, but they got buried and died in there, okay? And it's pretty crazy. There's really good fossils, okay? But I'll show you in particular this guy, okay? So this is one of ours, okay? And you can see, look at the lower jaw there. It's almost all one color, right? Because it's almost all one bone. There's still a few extra little bones back there. And this animal is claimed to have what's called a double jaw joint, okay? So reptiles have a jaw joint between what's called their articular bone and their quadrate. But mammals have a jaw joint between the squamosal and the dentary. And this guy looks like he kind of has both. And if you were an evolutionist, you would predict such a creature existed. You would say, yeah, there's got to be an animal that has both jaw joints. And lo and behold, they found an animal that has both jaw joints. And so that seems to match very closely with what an evolutionist would predict. And when we look at our mammals, our first mammals in the fossil record, they have a lot of similarities with those cynodonts. They're somewhat still sprawling in their posture. They still have some of those extra little bones back there. Some of them, once again, have a true double jaw joint, like our Morganucodon there, okay? And let me show you kind of why that's important. Oh, this clicker is really funny. Okay, not like a ha-ha kind of funny, but like a I want to smack it, kind of funny. So here's the lower jaw, Morgadeuchodon. Here's some other mammals, okay? You see these colorful bones here? Those are bones associated with the ear, okay? So this over here, this is a platypus's ear bones, some of them, okay? And that they make a loop there, that surrounds the eardrum, okay? In a baby platypus, so an embryonic platypus, when it's still developing in its egg, before it hatches, okay? This is what the lower jaw looks like. And there's the ear bones, and they're connected to the lower jaw with something called Meckel's cartilage. Meckel's cartilage is something that's only when you're an embryo, okay? And humans have this too, and it disappears as you go along. And so when they've done studies dissecting pig embryos and stuff like that, what they discovered is, sure enough, the ear bones start with the same tissue as the jaw in mammals. And then they separate during your development as an embryo, okay? Well, what we found in the fossil record is mammals that have Meckel's cartilage as an adult, it's still there, and it attaches the ear bones to the lower jaw. And so if you're an evolutionist, there's a pretty easy story here. You're like, yep, they started as lower jaw bones, they turned into something that could be used as an ear, the jaw joint switched to the mammal one, and these things got smaller and smaller and migrated deeper and deeper into the skull. And the fact that we can still see embryos today that have these traits, that tells us what the past was like. And that's their story. And when you look at the big picture of all of this, you can actually watch what they claim. You can watch the lower jaw bones get smaller and smaller and smaller. You can watch the ear bones develop. You can see all these things happening over geologic time, over millions of years. And that's the claim that's made. And so if you look at the evolutionary literature, they will actually say this is the single best example of an evolutionary transition from one big group to another in the fossil record. They call it the crown jewel of evolution. And so looking at all of this as a creationist, I want to be like, okay, what's actually going on here, right? How do we think through this? Because this sounds like a really convincing story. A story where they told it and then they even found evidence that seemed to back up their story. So what do we do as creationists? Oh, it's going too far. I don't want to see the doggy yet. Okay? Still seeing the doggy. Hold on. There we go. All right. Well, one option is that we could just deny it. We could say, oh, those aren't real fossils. And I meet people who do this. There are people who tell me like, oh, dinosaurs aren't real. And I'm like, what was I digging up all those years? Okay. No, that's not how Christians approach things. We don't go around denying objective reality, right? I showed you, we have footprints of these guys. They were walking around. They were doing stuff, right? If I go to the beach and I see a footprint in the sand, I don't think, that just appeared magically. The government put that there, right? I think, no, somebody was walking there, okay? Same thing with the fossil record, all right? Another option, now we can show the doggy, the puppers, make them appear. Magic. Technology is a word which means magic. Okay. We could hide. We could just say, you know what? I don't care. I don't want to know. It's not important. I'm just going to pretend it's not there. Listen, if that's the best we can do as Christians, then there's no point in Christianity. Like, what's the point of having a worldview if it doesn't explain the world? Right? If the Bible is true and God really told us how he made stuff, then we should have the confidence to step out there and say, you know what? Every discovery we make is going to match up with the Bible eventually. I might not know what it means right now, but I can be confident that what God told us is true, and that gives me the confidence to trust that I can discover. So let me tell you, our solution, I think we need to trust God. Doxology. Okay? We need to trust God. And what does it actually mean to trust God? Because that's easy, just like, oh, we need to trust God. It means you do stuff. You be honest. You tell the truth. You say, when you don't know, you say, I don't know. You don't just make something up. You don't come up with half-baked schemes. You don't say, well, it doesn't really matter whether this piece of evidence exists or not because, I want it to exist. No, you tell the truth. And it also means that you need to be humble. We need to say, hey, we don't have all the answers. Sometimes people who believe the Bible's not true have better answers sometimes for certain things. I don't think they're truly better answers, but right now they seem like better answers. And it's okay to acknowledge that. But you say, I'm going to be patient as we look for answers. I have met people who have abandoned the faith because of something that they read. They said, oh, Christianity can't be true because of this scientific discovery. Christianity can't be true because of what this psychologist said. And what's really particularly sad about those cases is if they had just waited 5 to 10 years, some other study would have come out and been like, oh, that's actually wrong. Oh, we were wrong about that piece of information. Oh, we interpreted that wrongly. Don't trade your eternal soul for what experts think at the moment. The revelation of God is true. And so regardless of what actually ends up being the case with these lower jawbones and stuff, listen, you can trust the Bible. It's been proven true over and over and over again. It's been proven reliable over and over again. And I'm here to tell you today, we can start getting some answers on these things because that's why I was going to South Africa, right? So one thing we can do, we can start doing some research on this as creationists. Can we come up with other answers? And we have been able to start coming up with answers. We can look at how are these things related in terms of created kinds, right? God didn't create ex nihilo on the creation week, Dobermans and Dachshunds and poodles and coyotes and foxes. He made a dog creature. And from that, after the flood, we got all the different breeds and species of dogs we have. And so we can do the same thing with these animals. And you know what we discover? It's not just one big evolutionary spectrum. The evolutionists would say you shouldn't be able to divide in groups. They should just be flowing one into the other as they evolve. And nope, what we find are really discrete groups, really unique individual groups. And that's what we would predict as creationists. And that's exactly what we find. And that's exciting. And so what we've been able to do with this research, okay, is cut up the tree. So where they drew this supposed continuous line from reptiles to mammals, this supposed crown jewel of evolution, we've been able to actually cut off all the branches and cut up the tree so it doesn't exist at all. And that's cool. That's exciting because that means, hey, there are actually separate creations of these things. During the creation week, God made these different kinds, and that's what we see in science, and that's exciting. But that doesn't give us all the answers. Because we want to know, okay, if that's the case, then why do they look transitional? Why do I have animals that kind of look like a reptile and kind of look like a mammal? Well, part of that is just our assumptions. Because yeah, when you look at the world today, you can see mammals and birds and reptiles and amphibians and fish, and they all look really different. Like nobody's out there and they're like, is that a fish or is it a mammal? Like that doesn't happen, right? I guess whales, but in general, that doesn't happen. But we created those categories based on what we knew existed in creation at the time. And when we found fossil animals, some of them fit really nicely in those categories. Like a woolly mammoth is just an elephant with fur, right? Easy. But other animals don't fit in our categories. And so an evolutionist looks at this and he says, aha, I see an evolutionary tree. And people are just like, okay, I guess you're right. I guess the Bible's wrong. No. What we realize is there's a bigger design pattern in place. If all these animals were still alive, we probably wouldn't have drawn our categories the same way. But we didn't know at the time. And so we need to go and take this back. We need to go and take another look at our assumptions. Let's think about this whole jaw to ear issue, okay? Yes, we've got these animals that supposedly look like they're evolving from mammals, but I don't think it's because they actually did evolve into mammals. I think it's because they're built along the same design blueprint. You guys have all taken biology class. I didn't share this with elementary because I knew it was going to confuse some of them, okay? But listen, all of you started as a single cell, which is crazy to think about, right? And that cell grew and divided and everything. And you know what else starts as a single cell? monkeys and fish and scorpions and trees. All of those things started as a single cell. And you know what? Unless you're specially trained in this and you looked at that cell, you wouldn't be able to tell me whether that was a human or a monkey or a horse or a scorpion. But as time goes on, as that cell divides and divides and divides and turns into different things, as development happens as an embryo, suddenly you're like, oh, that's a frog. That's a monkey. That's a human. And it turns out the more similar two animals are in appearance, guess what? The longer it takes in development to tell them apart. And that's what this tree is down here. This was drawn in the 1800s. My laser pointer is not pointing. It's the bottom thing here, okay? That thing. This guy in the 1800s, he drew this. He said, you know what? There's development here and here and here. And he followed it. And it turns out mammals all have more similar development to each other as embryos compared to birds or to reptiles or to fish. That's not shocking. But let me suggest to you, this is why these people think evolution is happening. Because yeah, if you actually mapped out all the development we go through from a single cell into a grown organism, it looks like evolution. And the more similar two animals are to each other, the more similar their development is going to be. And so I think, like I told you, our ear bones do come from our jaw bones during our development as embryos. And so imagine that God makes different animals, and some of them, he lets them go through that whole process, and other ones during their development as an embryo, he shuts it off at a certain time. He changes the timing. And so those animals, their jaw bones never turn into ear bones. They stay on the jaw. But other animals, other creatures, including us, he created us to go through that whole process, to not stop during our development. And that's why it looks like an evolutionary series. And what's really fun about this is this whole concept of homoplasy, which is a word you've never probably heard of, okay? It's a weird word. Only a few of us use it out there. It's when two things look like they're the same, but they don't actually share a common ancestry. So Darwin's whole idea of evolution is that two things look similar because they share a common ancestor. But then over time, we've discovered tons and tons of examples, and it increases every year, of things that look like they're the same, but they can't possibly have shared a common ancestor. And so what ends up happening is you get these holes in the evolutionary story that keep popping up, and they keep putting a patch on it, another hole, and they put a patch on it, another hole, and they put a patch on it. And I'm like, man, that sounds a lot like the development of heliocentrism. That sounds like back in the day when they thought everything went around the earth. And they were like, well, when they did more observations, they're like, actually, stuff goes around the sun and then the sun goes around the earth. Well, actually, and they had to keep modifying their model until finally Galileo was like, guys, we're the ones that are moving. And once you did that, all of a sudden it made sense. And I would suggest to you, I think that's where we are with evolution. I think they're putting all these patches on, they're trying to make it work, but they don't ultimately know what's going on. And so we have an opportunity to step in and explain things better. And so what do I leave you with here? Okay, scientific conclusion. There's different created kinds of thrapsids. That's cool. It's not just one continuous evolutionary series. You can actually find evidence for different created kinds. That's exciting, okay? But let me also point out to you, if I can get the clicker to recognize life. There we go. Listen, you don't need to be scared of what you see in a museum or in a book. You don't need to be scared of scientific discoveries because the Bible is true. Just because you don't understand how something relates to the Bible doesn't mean the Bible is wrong. It means you don't know everything. And guess what? We will never know everything on this earth. And so instead of being scared, instead of being like, what if they discover something that proves the Bible wrong? You don't need to worry about that because the Bible is true. Because Christ really came, because God actually revealed the truth of the universe to us in the Bible. It doesn't tell us everything, but it tells us what we need. And so you can depend on it. It is reliable. And as you go out into the world, you don't need to be scared of the things that are being discovered in science. You should be excited about them because it's more and more revelations of God's glory. And yes, there are people out there who are misinterpreting it. And they're giving the glory to science or to nature instead of to God. But we can look at it and say, wow, that's cool, God made that. And listen, we went really deep dive today, but if you aren't doing anything Sunday night, you should come and join me. And not just for this Sunday night, but in 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks, and then finally in 2 weeks, we'll actually go to the Natural History Museum, okay, in LA. But I'm going to be talking about this Sunday, creation in the fall, and then the flood, and then the post-flood world. And I'll be going through all this stuff. I would encourage you to come and join us back here Sunday night so you get more context. Okay, let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time we had this morning to be exposed to something absolutely incredible that you designed. Things that we weren't even aware were real, were actually out there. And Lord, that's amazing and interesting to behold. But Lord, it's so sad that people take that and try to make a story out of it to try and convince people that your word is not true. Lord, help us instead to recognize, hey, we can depend on your word fully. And when we do that and we step out in confidence, there are things to discover that match up with your word. There are ways to interpret things where we realize, oh, they've been looking at this wrongly. And Lord, it's my prayer that you be raising up somebody even in here to become a future scientist who can understand these things, or a future theologian to work through these things. But Lord, regardless, my prayer for everyone in here is that they would trust you. That they wouldn't feel like everything depends on them, that they wouldn't panic at the sound of every single discovery that's out there, every claim that somebody who's opposed to your word makes, but that they would rest in you, knowing that you are true and they do not need to be anxious, but they can cast all their cares upon you because you care for them. And it's in your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.